No, I could never forget about toys. Toys are the building blocks of my youth, the cartoons and the commercials, the soundtracks of my life. They're just toys for every occasion. Now, I do have my favorites, and some are more remembered than others, but loved just the same. There are toy lines based on movies, cartoons, TV, even comics, and some original ideas that tried their best to find a place in the increasingly crowded landscape. So, here are a few more that you may have loved or never heard of. But be honest, how many did you have? I'm Victor, and straight out of the Gen Experience, 10 more toy lines that added to Gen Xers' already diverse arsenal of plastic playthings. Which did you call yours? Click like and let's go. This line may have been your precious, but I wasn't under the Rings spell. Although I knew the 1978 animated Lord of the Rings movie well, having screened it in our tiny family-owned and operated movie theater. But that wasn't enough to inspire me to pick up these pieces, add them to a Christmas list, or beg my parents for. A sort of sequel to the 70s animated Hobbit, where Gollum had the more toady aesthetic that was both interesting and revolting. I hated looking at that guy, but would later see that same style when a certain mutant moved into Third Earth later in 1985. Ralph Bashki, the prolific filmmaker behind such classics as Wizards and Fire and Ice, created a look that Knickerbocker Toy Company decided to market with an 8-piece collection, remarkably on point with the famously 70s-styled rotoscope technique film characters. It's probably hard for young people today to believe that there was a time where a set of finger puppets in a brand was common. But oh my god, no, not Sam's face though? Sam's blow-up doll face? No, not common. Yikes. It wasn't a full cast by any means, but between $3 and $5 was a steal, and you could get the whole set for $25. Contrary to what young people might think today, that was a buttload of money back then. The movie still holds a special place in my heart. The figures, not so much, and are often relegated to an afterthought by many collectors. Flash has been around a lot longer than Queen or Sam the Centerfold, but the 1930s Hollywood matinee serials and the original comic strip started the fascination that led to the beloved Filmation cartoon. Well, at least the first season was beloved. The renewed interest helped launch the cult classic that is the 1980 feature film. The animated cartoon had 2 seasons, and although saturated in color that is the hallmark of Flash Gordon today, it was still so very Filmation. You can easily pick out Filmation in a lineup of animation any day, and I love it. The action was leaps above Josie and the Pussycats in space, and that's what I wanted on Saturday morning. But in the toy aisles, I walked right past the Flash Gordon action figure line. An impressive line that debuted in 1979 by Mattel and lasted 3 waves. And Ming the Merciless was in the first wave. Oh wait, God, give me a minute. $1.97? Holy sticker shock, that really hurts. Based on the cartoon, the characters were very recognizable and included a quality of assortment. They were, of course, 3 3/4 inch, because any toy who's any toy was 3 3/4 inch, since Star Wars made it the go-to scale. Most had a small accessory, white and easily swallowed, but this was the late 70s and early 80s, so whatever. The accessories had little variation, but the figures' molds were done well. Flash's look with his red shirt and belt of yellow circles was right on. And although the Lizardman figure was depicted as female, they never felt inclined to add a Dale Arden figure for Flash. So was the mentality of female figures in the boy-centric lines of the time. Que sera, sera. Okay, this one might be new to some of you, or at least to those who haven't spent too much time exploring one of the first toys from our Gen X forefathers. Those born in '65 or so may have very well enjoyed imaginative play with Major Matt Mason figures and playsets as they ran through 1972. 4 astronauts with the same body mold but unique head sculpts were technically action figures, but only because they were posable, not because they had joints per se. Articulation was made possible through rubber bodies over a wire armature, which was a common practice in many toys at the time. However, this does put a lot of wear and tear on the paint job, as well as the location of bending, giving these toys a short lifespan. Short or not, the toy line was successful with dozens of pieces to collect. A cohesive toy line was not as important back in the day, as is apparent with Captain Laser. He was a figure in the line who towered a good 6 inches above the main figures. He was huge, looking either like an afterthought or a reject from another failed toy line. He just didn't fit in. Captain Laser was described as a solar reactor with glowing eyes. Glowing eyes! I'd stand clear of him for sure. Speaking of not quite fitting in, Matt and friends, Sergeant Storm, Jeff Long, and Doug Davis lived and worked on their space station, which was actually on the lunar surface, so it was more like a moon base than space station. But the moon's still in space, so why not? They had a friend from Jupiter too, Callisto. Don't let his angry eyes fool you. He was an ally, along with Captain Laser and even Scorpio. So I'm not really sure who the antagonists were while they busily drove or flew their many vehicles around the surface of the moon, just working 9 to 5. The space race gave this line a great launch into popularity, but after the real moon landing, Matt and his astronaut buddies fell back to Earth like a defunct satellite. Their attempts to keep relevant with more science fiction didn't help either. And besides a rather random glow-up of Captain Laser, Major Mason lives on only as Easter eggs in pop culture. How about we jump ahead about 12 years for this one? With new films and TV shows, the popularity of Dune has not only had a resurgence, but is enlightening young people with its introduction to new generations. In 1984, we went to see the highly anticipated first feature film to bring sandworms and the House of Atreides to the big screen like everybody else. And like everybody else, we walked out fucking confused. It was just cool to see Sting in a movie, rare indeed. Or Sean Young, as her time in films was growing short. There was also the infant CGI that intrigued us, not to mention those bold blue eyes and riding giant sandworms that must have lived in the same universe as Beetlejuice. Well, with all of this and more, it was ripe for merchandise, and LJN would make the movie of the year the toy line of the year in '84. There were 7 figures, even sandworms, but they weren't shown due to confidentiality. A toy line that doesn't spoil a movie. Novel. Yes, we got a spiky-haired Sting, complete with a cat, who could stand in for Jones for your Alien collection. At least they didn't make him like this. We also got Halleck, played by Patrick Stewart in the... Oh, no, wait, just kidding. Guess he was just a tease of something we never got. Ah, but there was Lady Jessica, a vision in plastic... Oh, no, not her either. Just another tease to get you to buy into something that never gave us more than the initial 6 first figures. There was also the extra-large Baron character. The figure does not do his utterly nauseating character justice. You have to wonder who would want such a gross toy. But then again, we wanted and got Jabba the Hutt, so there's that. All the figures had unique molds, but this one took a lot of plastic. Do we have to pay more for more of him? Is a fat character more expensive to buy? If you know, let us all know. No, not this alternate universe Butch Cassidy, but this 1979 alternate universe of Butch and Sundance from the Kenner toy line. Butch and Sundance The Early Days was a 1979 movie and also a prequel to the huge success of 1969's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Tom Berenger and William Katt must have not had the same effect on audiences as this movie bombed, but kids still clamored for a toy line based on this PG film tie-in. The only gunslinger I liked was Rio Blast, and I never even got him as a kid, so I walked right past these blister cards on their pegs. Amazing molds for 3 3/4 inch scale. The line also had 3 additional figures and 2 pretty standard steeds, all of which would be reused for the upcoming Indiana Jones toy line. And even a real Western cafe. We all know it's a saloon. It even uses the same Star Wars cantina mold. They just didn't want to encourage kids to drink by having a saloon playset, I guess. It wasn't like it was a brothel. The playset just changed up the cardboard backdrop from Star Wars, and voila, money saved. Which was probably a good idea since the interest did lag, and a wave 3 of figures advertised in catalogs ended up joining other unproduced toys in that big old action figure limbo in the sky. Hey folks, thanks for joining me for the Gen Experience. I appreciate you being here, watching our shows, and subscribing. If you haven't, go ahead and click that button as well as the like. Now on with the show. Reviewed as the least appealing robots in the group when Consumer Reports Penny Power critiqued similar toys back in 1984. With that said, the Marvel-based Starriors, a subline of the Japanese Zoids, died miserably on the toy shelves. Created by Tomy, the Starriors had different looks and backstories created by Marvel with the hopes of starting a sensation. The Starriors were born out of Tomy's successful Zoids line, standing out with motorized features. Each Starrior had its own distinctive wind-up or pullback mechanism, allowing it to walk, roll, or perform some other action. This alone set it apart from the majority of its contemporaries. A 4-part comic and 6 pack-in mini-comics did not win over the masses at the time. Marvel worked hard with Tomy to create a complex, compelling, and ultimately convoluted storyline. But the look and feel of these figures, with their tiny but static humanoids inside of them, did not spark the imagination to keep moving forward. Did you have any Starriors, or fond memories of them? Like the Lone Ranger, Zorro is a legendary fictional character, a superhero of the Old West. Unlike the Lone Ranger, created in 1933, Zorro had been around since his introduction as a magazine serial way back in 1919. But it's the early 80s animated series that Gabriel produced their short toy line for. I've covered both of these cartoons in one of my Saturday morning shows before, so check it out, but this focus is on the toys. Both the Lone Ranger and Zorro's animated series impressed me in various ways, except for the replacement of Bernardo, Zorro's usual version of Robin. Instead, he got the most generic of sidekicks, Amigo. Dios mío. Still, it made sense that they would make accompanying action figure toy lines for these cartoons. Everybody was doing it, so peer pressure and all. Although the products of earlier generations, they were often kept relevant through the decades, and this 80s toy line was gonna do it. But it was a rough landscape, full of competition and new distractions that drew many kids' attention. Cowboys and Indians and the Old West were always secondary to cops and robbers for me in pretend play, so I never got any of these figures. There was fierce rivalry on the toy shelf, and space and fantasy toppled the Old West, until Bravestar, that is. But you can't deny both sets of famous figures with multiple points of articulation that helped to ride a horse filled a void with their quality construction and molding. The card art was sharp and striking, and there are super fans of these incredible figures today. Conservative in terms of figure numbers, they both still included a balance of good guys and baddies, plus their steeds, which make these legendary masked men worth collecting. Now, here's a strange one. People love this guy, a toy line based only on a comic book, but the comic would come out a year after the toys debuted in 1982. Remco released Crystar action figures, playsets, beasts, and accessories to a market that just couldn't be contained. It was bulging at the seams, with G.I. Joe, Masters of the Universe, and Star Wars already winning it out the gate, especially with various multimedia behind each of those. Crystar is not known for any runaway success in the US. Remco sold its license to a UK company, hoping to recoup some losses by marketing them in Europe. Marvel did release their limited run comic series of the franchise, and surprisingly, it runs parallel to and includes other heroes like Doctor Strange. And this property is no stranger than anything else at the time. Heroes of crystal, villains of lava, very good against evil. Most people would assume the comic was based on the toy line. But Marvel owned the whole kit and caboodle. They created Crystar with the intent to market the characters and sell their license to a toy brand. Those who didn't read comics may have simply passed it up for other options. Their look just isn't as dynamic in toy form when you look at them on the shelf. At first glance, the figures don't give off a, "Hey, look at me, take me home." Not like their card art does. The cross-sell makes them much more fascinating, as do these awesomely cheesy costume characters doing a photo op. You may completely disagree, but I don't find them remotely interesting. And that Crystal Castle playset, you call that a playset?
It's awful, and those shoes and that coat, jeez.
But what does that matter, right? There were and are fans. I'm just not one. Some of you may have great memories with the Crystal Warriors. I know they have recently got an upgrade in Marvel Legends, so let us know about them in the comments. This is a huge ass toy line. And you can do that when your figures are the mask scale of just over 2 inches. I'm sure I saw these in toy aisles in 1986 when they were released, but I had my favorites I kept my eye on even as I began that aging out process, that one we all had to face sometime. Looking at them now, they seem grounded in some real-world space exploration. which is fantastic, but I know my heart was in fantasy and science fiction. The Coleco line does seem to have you covered with like 36 individual figures, incredible playsets and vehicles. It was ambitious. The playsets took up a lot of space on shelves and probably in bedrooms too. This toy line, as expected, was followed up with marketing media to push sales in the form of, what else? A cartoon. It was 1987 after all. But with low ratings, it was canceled after only 13 episodes. Many people have brought up to Starcom to me before, but it just seems to be one of those that many of the population have either forgotten or simply ignored. We could go on with like Dungeons and Dragons, a toy line with action and staction figures that came across as a line that didn't know exactly what it wanted to be. And what about Shogun Warriors? Such a history and memorable for introducing more Americans to Japanese style, storytelling, anime, and the toys for the first time. There was just so many toys in so little time before we had to grow up and leave it all behind, at least for a little while. So many exciting and innovative action figures and playsets just left on the toy shelf pegs. That is, until we grew up and have the ability to buy what we want, when we want, and how we want. Ah, the joy of being an adult collector and toy fan. Am I right? Many of these may not have had the same success as some of their more famous contemporaries, and do not often get the hyped rebrands or reboots they may or may not deserve. But somebody loved them, somebody played with them. Perhaps it was you. Most importantly, they have a long-lasting emotional connection and memories to so many people. Just like most things during the Gen experience. Which did you have? Which do you remember? Click the thumbs up, press subscribe, and then find other great shows on this channel that celebrate the generation that would unfriend people by simply tearing them out of a print photo. Thanks for watching, and until next time.
Does your wife like toys too?